Thank you for Yeah.
Good morning, dear guests, esteemed faculty. Yeah. Good morning, dear guests, esteemed faculty, scholars, and policy practitioners. We welcome you to the 20th edition of International Conference on Public Policy and Management. This year's conference is themed Rethinking State Capacity in Delivering Public Policy. This flagship event of the Center for Public Policy marks yet another milestone in our journey of inquiry and dialogue on strengthening governance and public delivery. Here with us, we have Professor Rajlakshmi Kamath, faculty, Professor Gopal Nayak, chairperson CPP, Professor Arnab Mukherjee, faculty PPP, and our plenary speaker, Dr. Subrata Rakshit. May I invite the dignitaries to please light the lamp along with Dr. Mahesh Chandra, who's also one of our presenters and CEO at AIMS Delhi, and Atif, who's one of our organizing committee members. Thank you so much. It's now my pleasure to invite Professor Gopal Nayak to deliver our official welcome address and set the tone for the conference. Over to you.
Well, good morning, everyone. Welcome to the 20th International Conference on Public Policy and Management, organized by the Center for Public Policy at IIM Bangalore. This is a special year for us, the center, as it is our 25th year of establishment, and we have celebrated our foundation day on last July 10th. On that occasion, we were privileged to have a lecture by Dr. P.K. Mishra, Principal Secretary to the Honorable Prime Minister of India. He spoke on how India has become a leading country in managing disasters, saving lives and properties, helping other countries, and has been appreciated by the world bodies. The Center for Public Policy was established in the year 2000 with a tripartite agreement between the Department of Personnel and Training, Government of India, United Nations Development Programme, and IIM Bangalore, with the objective of creating public policy capacity in the country, influencing public policy discourse and development outcomes through evidence-based policy research, capacity building, and outreach. Since then, the center has initiated several activities. The center has been a pioneer in offering the postgraduate program in public policy and management, or in short, PGPPM, in the year 2002, aimed at building capacity among the civil service officers to enhance efficiency, leadership qualities, and management skills. The curriculum is intended to broaden awareness of the latest trends in the policy approaches, deepen technical and analytical skills for public policy application. Being in the management school, we have been able to offer an effective management module in the program to help them to hone their skills in effective policy implementation so crucially needed in our country. 20 batches of this program have graduated more than 500 officers, many of whom have reached the highest level in their respective departments, ministry, and contributed to initiating new policies and steering policy changes in their roles. This program is continuously reviewed, like our other programs in the Institute, based on the inputs from Government of India, alumni, faculty of the Institute, and other public policy stakeholders to ensure the curriculum is up to date and is able to address the current issues. From the 20th batch, the program is transitioned into a hybrid, takeable with on-campus and online modules, synchronous and MOOCs-based, that uses IAMB's online learning systems, that is IAMBX. The PGPPM at IAMB, which is also can be offered as a master's in management studies, is highly appreciated by its alumni, not only for its academic rigor and set of specialty designed courses, but also for practice orientation through integrative policy, policy paper, policy immersion, global best practices, and policy practicum. There have been encouraging developments and responses to the research work and dissertation of PGPPM graduates over the years. Many PGPPM alumni have published books and peer-reviewed papers based on their research completed as a part of the studies, and many have also been recognized by awards and distinguished and meritorious services. In terms of positions of responsibilities, many alumni have been chief secretaries of state governments, secretary to the Government of India, appointed to distinguished roles in planning and regulatory bodies such as Niti Aayog, Security Exchange Board of India, Telecom Regulatory Authority of India, National Academy of Direct Taxes, and international organizations such as World Bank, International Monetary Fund, and several United Nations bodies. They also hold leadership positions in several leadership positions in central and state public sector undertakings such as GAIL India, Bharat Sanchar Nigam, Bangalore Metropolitan Transport Corporation, Maharashtra Housing and Area Development Authority, Jawaharlal Nehru Post, and so on. As Finance Secretary, Dr. Hasmukh Adia is credited with the success of Jan Dhan program of Government of India, which has been actually an anchor for many of the financial services. The current CPI Director, Agriculture Secretary, Transport Secretary, to name a few, are graduates of this program. PGPPM alumni from the social sectors are now consultants and senior managers at leading banks, PwC, Infosys Consulting, Accenture, HCL Technology, Antara Foundation, Microsave, Access Health International, broking institutions, and another important role Center has played is in designing and offering various in-service long-duration training programs for civil service officers, particularly mid-career training of IAS officers. Several such programs have been conducted by IAM Bangalore since then for officers in the Forest Service, Foreign Service, Revenue Service, Economic Service, CPI, CAG, and including programs for elected representatives, members of Legislative Assembly, and members of Parliament. Recently, we have offered a 2-year Mahatma Gandhi National Fellow Program, support of the Ministry of Skill Development, Government of India, to 75 selected graduates this year. The center carries out research studies in areas of health, education, environment, ecology, gender, inclusion, agriculture, rural development, legal studies, technology policy, regulation, public-private partnerships, and so on. The studies on universal health coverage and Jal Jeevan Mission have been appreciated by the respective. The output of the studies is published widely in professional, national, and international journals, books, as well as periodicals. Several seminars, workshops are also conducted on various public policy issues throughout the year. Annual CPP Foundation Day lecture has been delivered by distinguished speakers such as former judges of Supreme Court and members of the planning bodies. Center has been organizing annual national conference on public policy and management, conferencing, crucial platform for all stakeholders from a wide range of domains to engage in in-depth discussions and debates. A space where research results in public policy are shared, ideas are discussed, and new perspectives are formed. The conference provides a unique opportunity for policy stakeholders to understand how societal, political, and economic dynamics progress over time. The need for discourse on shaping the public policy and constant iteration of learning, formulating, implementing, evaluating, and relearning is essential. We hope that participating in this conference will significantly enhance the understanding of public policy and its effective implementation and provide a robust platform to share the work of academics and practitioners in a global, peer-reviewed, rigorous environment so that policy choices can be better analyzed and understood. To facilitate interaction between the policymakers, implementers, and researchers, we have introduced sessions for policy practitioners to share their ideas, innovative solutions, and problems. We hope to deepen such interaction to strengthen public policy research activities as well as strengthen policy design and implementation. Each year, we select nearly 50 to 60 research papers on various public policy themes from about 200 submissions and are presented by national and international researchers. We have a very distinguished advisory council consisting of Mr. Parameshwar Iyer, Executive Director of the World Bank, Mr. Abdullah Khan, Deputy Resident Representative of the UNDP, Ms. Vinita Bali, former Managing Director of Britannia Industry, and Professor David Van Slyke, of Dean of Maxwell School of Citizenship and Public Affairs, LATCT. I take this opportunity to thank them for their continuous support. This is the 20th conference we are organizing, focusing on the theme of sustainability. In the past, we had themes such as urban planning, inclusion, water resources, health, etc. We received 170 submissions this year, out of which we have selected 60 papers for presentation. We thank NABARD, Axis Bank, and Quest Corporation for their financial support for this conference. Today, we are fortunate to have Dr. Subrata Rakshit, former Director General, DRDO, and a distinguished scientist to deliver inaugural keynote address. I once again welcome you all to this conference and hope that the next 3 days will be very fruitful in terms of bettering understanding of public policy making and implementation, and that it will trigger many innovative ideas for your future research. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Raik, for your insightful words, for sharing with us about the beginning of CPP, its implemented programs, and the impact it has made, and for guiding us into what promises to be an engaging and an enriching conference ahead. We are excited to show you the journey of Center for Public Policy at IIMB. Over the past 25 years, the Center for Public Policy at IIMB has worked to make a difference in the field of public policy through research, discussions, and partnerships. We've heard from those who've led the center about what makes the center an impactful resource to the realm of public policy and how it's grown over time and enriched them with golden memories. I would request the dignitaries to take their seats amongst the audience and we can watch the journey of CPP together. Thank you. Please, ma'am.
Established in 1972, IIMB began with a unique vision, which was to take formal management to the undermanaged sectors of the economy. Consistent with the dominant political and economic philosophies of those times, the institute in Bangalore was initially set up to cater to the needs of public sector enterprises.
Over a period of time, IMB moved away from public sector orientation, more towards general management, and then came back into looking at public policy. So it's been a full circle where the institute has been constantly dynamic about responding to the given ecological environment and economic environment.
In 1998, the Government of India selected IIMB to set up the Centre for Public Policy.
The 1990s saw big changes both globally and in our own country around the meaning of what is public and also around the meaning of development. And these changes had a great impact on the directions that the Center for Public Policy took from the beginning.
On 10th July 2000, the Centre for Public Policy was officially established. This underlined that IIMB did not lose sight of the importance of the public sector. 10 years after liberalization, IIMB got the opportunity to accommodate its founding vision in a more appropriate setting.
So from the beginning, we were very interested in issues of health, in issues of education, in questions of gender equality, in questions of socioeconomic inequality, by and large, in the country and in the work that the Center for Public Policy, its teaching programs and its research programs would have to engage in.
The Center for Public Policy has been a pioneering experiment in building public policy research, education, and training. In the last 25 years of its existence, the center has been able to support public policy as a separate discipline in the academic setting in the country.
It happened because at that very time, the Government of India, in association with the UNDP, had been doing a lot of work on how to improve capacity building in government administration. And the idea of having a Center for Public Policy and also to have an India-based degree-giving, long-duration training program for the senior civil service was seen as something really necessary. And so because of that, the Government of India and the UNDP actually put up a lot of funds to enable it to happen. And it was just not awarded to us immediately. There was a very rigorous competition, and we were very happy to be able to win this competition, judged by a range of external experts. So that is the foundation. We got selected through rigorous competition.
A lot of these training programs which are targeted towards government officers, including Indian Administrative Service, Indian Foreign Service, Indian Forest Service, income tax. We were able to attract those programs into the institute because of this sectoral orientation which started in the beginning.
Thus, the postgraduate program in Public Policy and Management, or PGPPM, was officially launched on 7th June 2002.
So when we began the PGPPM program in 2000, the institute was just transitioning from a mode of doing a regular MBA to a public policy program, and this was very new. There were a lot of challenges. For one, the bureaucrats were really not used to sitting in the classroom and taking orders from faculty. Second, one of the funny things we realized was that you would give a very detailed case study, and they were so used to reading the first and the last para of files, they would just read the first and the last para and then give the analysis. So there was a lot of learning.
Third conference of CPP is when I joined the conference, and it took a different turn itself. I mean, before that we had like 2 days conference, but we made it like a 3-day. But we had about that time itself like 200 plus papers. So that was a very successful conference we started, and that almost set the format for the subsequent conferences. And I would say now I understand we are doing the 20th conference, and we are almost continuing the trajectory, and it has been improving its quality year by year and it's doing great.
The Mahatma Gandhi National Fellowship Program, which was piloted at IIM Bangalore, and then based on the IIM Bangalore pilot at the Center for Public Policy, it was scaled up for 8 other IIMs to run this. So going from the pilot batch to the national rollout, the IMB, or the Center for Public Policy driven model, was something that went from impacting 70 districts in the pilot to effectively 670 districts in the national rollout, affecting every state in India.
Almost immediately after joining CPP, I landed a fairly big project, a research project that was funded by the Dutch government at that time under the MDG, the Goal for Gender Equality. This was a cross-country collaboration, Karnataka in India, Ghana and Ecuador. And it really pioneered a household survey methodology in collecting individual asset and wealth data. So to think about inequality within the household and how to get at that information. I think it was a fairly unique study that had important policy contributions. CPP is an exciting place to be because it allows you the ability to think outside the box, and it also gives you an opportunity to meet with people.
The center also has its lasting contribution in terms of designing appropriate courses for practice of public policy, which has helped applying new ideas in the governance arena. Our effort continues through these activities to help shape effective public policy design and implementation in the country.
So what is the impact of CPP? Clearly, extremely high. We can see the impact of our students across the policy area in the Indian government, the central government as well as the state governments. Many have gone on to lead their departments, significantly influence policy or rewrite policy for the departments. More than that, I think the impact of CPP through the multiple programs we did many executive education programs. For example, we did phase 5 for the Indian Forest Service, phase 4 for the Indian Administrative Service, and for the Indian Police Service, and so on. So many of these programs have helped in building up the capacity of bureaucracy.
I never wanted to go abroad to study public policy because it was my firm opinion that public policy should be studied in the Indian context. I was in the first batch of this public policy program of IIM, and I found it extremely useful to me in my career.
younger faculty and also the secondary members should think about what will be the next orbit of Center for Public Policy, which direction we want to take to and how it should be, what will be the nature of public policy program that we want to do, how do we engage with public, how do we engage with government, and how do we make ourselves continue to be relevant to the government.
So in a sense, this is a very exciting time. We have 25 years behind us and hopefully another 25 years ahead of us, and maybe more in terms of how this public policy area is going to grow. There are many kinds of conversations we are doing, and I welcome you all to participate in this lovely journey.
The Center for Public Policy is supported by a small but a very strong team that has always been instrumental in managing and delivering the functions and operations. The continued support from the team has been the backbone of the center to excel across all facets.
Thank you. We now invite Professor Rajlakshmi to introduce the speaker of our day. Thank you, ma'am.
Okay, on the eve of the 20th annual conference of the Center for Public Policy at IIM Bangalore, we are really honored to welcome Dr. Subrata Rakshit as our plenary speaker. Dr. Rakshit, a recently retired distinguished scientist of the DRDO, exemplifies the vital intersection of cutting-edge science and national policy making. His presence underscores a milestone for our conference. For the first time, a public sector scientist will address this gathering, reflecting the ever-growing influence of science and technology in shaping India's policy landscape. In today's India, institutions like DRDO are central to our strategic vision and self-reliance agenda. Their innovations inform defense capabilities, drive civilian spillover applications, and set benchmarks for technological excellence. Correspondingly, our conference program has also expanded to include a dedicated research track on emerging technology and policy. While traditional themes such as health and education now very routinely feature research papers examining digital solutions, data privacy, technology-enabled delivery models. It is therefore particularly fitting that Dr. Rakshit joins us at this moment. His distinguished career within the DRDO and his deep engagement with technology-led transformation equips him to offer unparalleled insights. Drawing on his biodata, I will shortly introduce his many achievements and contributions. Dr. Rakshit did his BTech from IIT Bombay in 1988 and completed his MTech and PhD from Caltech, USA. He joined the Center for AI and Robotics, CAIR DRDO, in December 1994, where he worked till May 2023. At the CAIR DRDO, Dr. Rakshit worked on image processing, computer vision, neural networks, and cybersecurity. From 2000 to 2012, he headed the computer vision group and worked on multi-sensor data fusion and net-centric warfare, participating in various DRDO's activities related to Army's development projects. He has guided design and development in the areas of cybersecurity, secure execution environments, secure communications and networking, and he has also contributed to inform security policy formulations. From June 2023 to January 2025, he was a distinguished scientist and DJ at the DRDO headquarters, where he spearheaded DRDO's grant and aid projects to academia and industry, as well as actively participated in DRDO's internal transformation and initiatives. He superannuated in 2025 and has been leading a private life since then. Dr. Rakshit's plenary lecture is titled Technology-Driven Capacity Challenges to Public Policy Formulation, a relook at education, identity, privacy, and democracy. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Subrata Rakshit, whose unique experience at the forefront of India's technological enterprise promises an insider's perspective on how science and innovation continue to redefine our nation's policy priorities. Thank you.
Thank you for that kind introduction. At the outset, I'd like to thank Professor Naik, Professor Kamath, for having invited me here. Yes, I could sense that this was a bit of a break from tradition, as it is for me. I'm used to more routinely addressing either bureaucrats or scientists. But for that reason, I really cherish the opportunity to be here today. And so this will be my first attempt at giving a lecture to a general audience on management. Now, the theme as given was with respect to the capacity for policies. Now, the way I see it as an engineer, there are two things I'd like to say at the outset. One is that you need to have an awareness for realizing there's a problem to be solved with policy. Second, you need to actually get the policy formulation done by a set of wise people. Third, you need to have the capacity to administer those policies. And finally, we need to educate the subjects of those policies, sometimes maybe the population at large or some specific demographics, as to why they should benefit from following that policy and what they should do to comply with the policy. If all four are not done, the effectiveness of that policy is not going to be seen. Now, with respect to the actual formulation, as well as the administration, as well as the public outreach, y'all are the experts, and as an ivory tower scientist, I cannot be the one telling you anything about it. Which then leads me to focus on the problems to be solved by that policy. In economics, you have this hidden hand of Adam Smith, that if every company and individual works for their own benefit in a rational way, overall very good things will happen. By and large, that may be true for economics and many other things, but it's by and large. Individuals going after their perceived individual benefits cannot always get it right. So sometimes they may make a mistake, or sometimes individual following their own goals can lead society as a whole to get stuck in a bad place. I mean, A, it is bad, and B, it's stuck. And those things have happened historically. So you need to have a policy precisely for dealing with these situations, where left to itself, 1.4 billion Indians are not going to get it right. And narrowing it down, if you want, let's say the public sector itself or the government itself. So it's up to you to size your scope. But effectively, this is what it is, that the bulk of the work in this world will be done by people going after their own benefit according to their own intelligence. But there will be places where we need to anticipate from the top that this is where there will be problem if we just allow the system in its free state. Therefore, we need to intervene. Therefore, we need a policy. The consequence of me looking at it that way is that my talk might sound a bit pessimistic. That's because all the good things that are happening naturally I have ignored, because that does not need a policy. They are good things. So I'm looking at precisely the places where the shoe is beginning to pinch. So pardon the slightly dark outlook of the talk. It is not to say I'm a pessimist. I'm very much an optimist. And with that, let me get started on the talk.
Yes, sir. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. And in particular, the topic, and in effect, it was suggested that I should talk about the technology aspects as they relate to public policy. So, one is, where are we having problem anticipating the problems? What would it take to actually have a set of people who can make the correct policy choices? And as I said, at that point, I would pretty much stop. How to go around administrating it or explaining it to the public, I will not that much get into. Now, for the ambit of the talk, I've picked certain areas for illustrative purposes. That's not to say technology doesn't impact anything else. However, when I subsequently sat down to make the slide, I had a sense that I've bitten off too much, because between education, economy, identity, privacy, and democracy, that's way too much for one talk. So what I will do is I will subsequently say what about each of these I intend to talk about. It's not comprehensively everything in democracy or everything in education. So some specific aspects I want to talk about. Now, in what way is technology coming and disrupting or creating a need for public policy? So I have thought about it and brought it down to 4 things which I will explain in detail. One is, we always assume an informed consent, and we are supposed to obtain informed consent in some places explicitly, but very often socially we take it for granted. Technology is breaking this down. Then there is a question of prior knowledge, kind of linked with that informed consent, that there are many things for which we have traditions to guide us. We don't always think about everything in a deep sense. These are the rules of the thumb, what our grandparents taught us, what our teachers banged into our heads. And again, this prior knowledge helps cut down on the intellectual load on ourselves. Now, if that prior knowledge becomes inappropriate and we have to start thinking on our feet all the time, that leads to a huge intellectual capacity bottleneck in day-to-day life. So that's another thing that I want to look at. Then there is population yield. And I don't mean fertility rates. I don't even mean economic productivity. I mean, in a sense, the capacity and the willingness to change. How much is the population willing to yield to a demand for change? And this cannot be taken to be infinite. We cannot assume that we can always train people to do whatever we want, or that they are even willing to do that. And this will put certain design limitations on what I believe should be the ideal end state. And we'll need a policy to guide it towards that. And finally, this far more abstract business of intelligence, brought into public domain these days by artificial intelligence, but there was a simmering human intelligence aspect as well, which we have not addressed so far, and I think it's high time we did. So first I will talk about these areas, then I'll talk about these related issues, then I will try to match them one-on-one and bring out that in what way I mean that these issues are affecting these areas. And finally, exactly as it says, where angels fear to tread. Being a retired person for the first time in my life, I can rush in where angels fear to tread. So this is purely me, no institutional connotations, no background relevant. So I will go ahead and talk about certain unsettled but risky topics like AI, economic production versus consumption, and defining of rights, if time permits. So what I consider to be core here for each of these. In the matter of education and economy, the purpose I feel in terms of education, and again, this is a scientist talking, so social scientists should feel free to correct for that or compensate for that. That one is, we wanted certainly everybody to have a certain awareness of the world we live in. We also wanted a certain common understanding for social coherence. And this is not abstract. In engineering and communication, there's an entire theorem called Slepian-Wolf theorem, which says that two entities with a common background knowledge can communicate so much faster. So this is real. If you want, it can even be measured. What it means is that we have to make sure that there is a certain common level of understanding which everybody in every stream, in every walk of life can be counted upon to have. Only then will subsequent adult life information exchanges and discourses and policy rollouts be practicable. Otherwise, we'll break up into groups and not talk to each other. The elephant in the room, of course, is skilling for productivity. Ultimately, all this abstraction is all very well, but finally, father and mother will bang down on son and daughter and say, you better get 95. So the economic productivity is what has dominated our education system. And in some ways, I would say it's pretty much bent it out of shape in certain cases. And these are things which might again need policy intervention, because leaving it to individuals has certainly taken us down the wrong path. And ultimately, you also want this education system to deliver the life skills for happiness. And this is something I've always felt very passionate about. We are the alpha species on the planet. We are supposed to have conquered everything. We have no threats, no dinosaurs left. So why are we living such stressed out, unhappy lives? This is not an individual failure. This is a design failure at the top. And I think we should call it as such. Let us not keep blaming some 17-year-old, 20-year-old, 30-year-old that why did they go and kill themselves? Why did they die of a heart attack? Somewhere I feel this life skills for happiness is getting underemphasized and undertaught. And consequently, we are not able to deal with the unnecessary stresses that we are creating. So it is no longer a small effect. It is becoming a very large effect. So I want to talk about that implicitly in the subsequent slides. In terms of identity, now here I am not talking about any social upliftment or something. This is purely identity of individuals for day-to-day transactions. The most important thing is you want to have uniqueness so that you can single out that this is that person and that person can say, I am this and not anybody else. And certainly what we had originally assumed was our names would be our identities. It is not. Ram Prasad, son of Shyam Prasad, doesn't give you any uniqueness whatsoever. So, alphabetically, we may have a lot of alphabets at our disposal, but culturally, it is the same set of good attributes, gods and goddesses, a few famous people here and there, and that's our namespace, which at the national level or even at the global level is a collapse. You cannot have identity dealt with by these cultural norms. On top of it, it's an unregulated parents and grandparents assigning names. You have collisions even within a family. Okay. So the uniqueness has to be established in terms of the identities that we are generating. Then you also want it to be constant. It cannot be something that keeps changing from place to place and time to time, because then your back-end administration will become chaotic. What is most desirable is that the identity be verifiable, that I can have a way of knowing that if you are saying you're so and so, you are in fact so and so. If it is not verifiable, it would be good if it is at least attestable. If somebody is able to say that, yes, believe me, this is that person. If nothing else, we should be able to pull off an authentication to produce something which convinces you that I am in fact that person. This is important because when we went into cyberspace at a national and global scale, we gave up on verifiability, we gave up on attestation, and we went to authentication. So everything became password based. And I will tell you why technologically these were bad situations to be in, and now by policy we need to come back to verifiable. Doable, but it will require a policy, not on its own. Privacy as an option to withhold information. As human beings, we are not perfect. We are not the gods yet. So yes, there are things about ourselves we may not want others to know. Now, withholding of information is one thing, but the way this privacy has grown as a politically correct position to have and policy making to pursue that political correctness, it has actually gone wrong. And I will take some time to explain to you why this privacy needs a relook, both from a rationality point of view and a technology point of view. And last of all, democracy. Now, democracy is many things to many people, but it's a scientist talking to you, right? An engineer. So to me, democracy is fundamentally a beautiful distributed computing system. That if you have a proposition which no Pandit can actually solve equations and say that this is right and that is wrong, in the worst case, you let loose a democracy. You ask 1 billion people to say whether they are happy or sad with what has happened. And based on that collective overall answer, you might make a call. Now, this is the reason why democracy has been used only for those things for which you don't have a closed form analytic solution. Nobody does astronomy by democracy. You don't do road building and bridge building by democracy, because that you can solve. Okay. So now the question is, in today's democracy, what are we asking people to solve by voting? And to what extent are we allowing them to actually get that decision right? So that is something that I think we need to look at. by no means am I saying that we should, I'm having doubts about the existence of democracy. It is definitely a very good thing to have and we should have it. But we still need to think about how we need to nurture democracy in the present age. So these are what I will consider to be the core, and I'm not going to repeat this slide later. By the way, I've also told the organizers that these slides can be shared with anybody who asks for it. There's nothing secret, confidential, or anything like that. And you're free to use it wherever you want. So, I mean, too much of note taking is not required. A plenary talk is meant to be heard. It's not a classroom lecture. Okay. And now on to technology. Again, I'm not going to get into anything very specific, no heavy duty equations or anything like that, no technical jargon, I hope. So, what about modern technology is requiring policies to fix problems and why that policy making is getting difficult? First of all, the technology is getting harder to understand by the day. And I'm making that statement as a 30 years of scientist. I find it hard. I have no doubt that most people will find it pretty much that somebody says so, so I believe it. Now, if technology becomes hard to understand, knowing what was necessary and what was incidental becomes difficult. Was it necessary that you should have incompatibility between two systems, or was it somebody's marketing gimmick? And should you therefore have a policy intervention to fix the problem? These are problems we are facing every day. GSM, CDSM, this technology, that technology, somebody says this is compatible, somebody says it is not. Then finally somebody says roaming is as cheap as local calls. Now, many of these things were differently put simply because nobody understood enough about the underlying technology. We engineers were trying to create a paradise, but the marketing and finance people were out to make money. And sometimes things get out of control. So, one problem is it's hard to understand. Secondly, it is evolving and diversifying with no real checks. So, it is changing, and you are having more and more technology incorporated into your everyday life, and with no real checks on its speed and quality. So, you are not holding a election to decide whether you want to have the technology of cell phone created. That's not the way any technology has ever happened. So some scientists, some engineers somewhere will figure out a technological breakthrough. Then go and report it to the boss. Boss, sir, madam. Oh yeah. Next thing you know, after 5 years, some technology is unleashed. Now, once the technology is unleashed into the product space, then people will wake up and say, okay, if this is what it is and it is disrupt to society, I need to have some safeguards for it. So the internet happened first. Trying to do a cyber cell in every police station happened 30 years after that. Okay. So the technology, there is no mechanism. I mean, you are talking about peer-reviewed journals, but that peer review is to make sure that technology is correct technically, not that it is safe socially, or whether it is even desired by anybody in society. And the quality also, because of the rate at which it is going, nobody is going to bother making it very perfect, because you know that after 6 months or 2 years, it's going to change anyway. So why would I bother perfecting it? I mean, you wouldn't buy a high value Armani suit for a 15-year-old who's going to outgrow it in 6 months. You will just buy something that is going to be okay for 6 months. That's it. That's the wear and tear you want. So increasingly, the depth of expertise and the perfection in design associated with much of the technology development is getting shallow, because people know that we'll move on to the next thing anyway. Or anyway, I have only had 6 months to understand this. Now I have to conduct a design review and say whether the design is right or wrong. So how perfect can I get about it? All of these are the negative sides, but then there is a last point, which is the positive side. It's way too useful and seductive for anyone to ignore or throttle. So imperfect as it is, ominous as that fine print on the disclaimer might be, which of us have not closed our eyes and clicked on the OK button? Go, Baba, go and install. Let me get the browser going. After that, I'll see what has happened to my computer. So people are being rational. They are not being stupid. They are not getting conned. The benefit we are going to be getting from technology is huge, and we are getting huge benefits. So as a result, if you want to contain what is negative about the technology, there is a very thin line we need to tread. You cannot choke the technology benefits to your people, whether it's a civilian population, government bureaucrats, army personnel, whatever it is. They will have to have the technology, because if the other person has it and we don't, competitively we lose. And that's bad. So dealing with imperfect technology would have to be something that we have to get used to. Now, what does it do? In terms of informed consent, the future impacts are not understood or predictable. So when you ask me to give an informed consent to saying that should I go ahead and do this, I may have a vague sense of what might happen if I don't, but I really wouldn't know what will happen if I do. And under those conditions, people are going ahead and saying yes if they're really desperate. Prior knowledge, society needs a few generations to build priors. So after some time, you understand that, okay, if I go down a dark road at night, then okay, this might happen to me, that might happen to me, and I'll take some precautions. I know when to lock my door and when not to lock my door. If I'm just going out to get the milk from the gate, I'm not going to lock my door and go for it. If I'm going for a vacation, big lock I'll put on the door. These are all priors we have developed. We have understood what will happen if I do it, what will be the cost if I don't. So we take a call. If new things are coming at us all the time, then it takes a while for society to suffer and learn what that prior knowledge should be. And that is taking time. And because of the constant rate of change, you are never done catching up. You are further fallen behind. Again, some new technology will come and we'll have to run for it. Then the population yield. Can everyone understand the technology and does everyone even want to? So, as I said, we didn't take an election on it. AI and automation happened on its own because technically it was feasible. Now you are having a hue and cry in society saying that this is disruptive, this is good, this is bad. So how do we go ahead limiting the assumptions that the people at the top are making about the characteristics of the society below them before deciding that this is where I want to go? So suppose you had a nation where everybody was into farming and wanted to remain farmers. You can't tomorrow say all of you should become data scientists. Now, this has all kinds of impacts. If you are trying to put an education system, it will have an impact. You are trying to put an economy in place, it will have an impact. So we cannot just assume that all you need is a good education system and a stick and everybody will be made to go from this state to that state. Somewhere there are limits to human evolution. Our physical evolution is very slow, if not stopped altogether. I mean, ever since we went into marriage, each one take one, evolution as such has come to a stop. Physically, we cannot evolve. Only thing that can happen is at that time we had a certain excess of cognitive abilities. We are kind of using that up as we go along with a better and better education system. Somewhere it will hit a limit. And we need to know when we are close to that limit and stop. And I would say we are already creaking and pinching at the shoe that it is not working out as well as we thought it would. And finally, this business of intelligence. We are used to dealing with intelligence when we are dealing with other human beings. Other human beings are sharp. But we don't bother thinking about intelligence when we are dealing with objects because they are like, no matter what we do, it will behave in exactly the same way. But now if you start putting intelligence into objects, that behavior pattern has to change. Secondly, as the capabilities and powers of those with intelligence become dramatically more than those who are less gifted, we would need to have certain safeguards put in place to ensure that the top 5, 10, 15% doesn't go around brutalizing the bottom 50. So that can be something that we look at. So both human and artificial intelligence is a problem. I mean, could be, and we would have to have a policy to make sure it is benign. And the reference I will give is how do we deal with quote unquote divine intelligence? Now, there we always say that, okay, if something good happens, then that's the benevolent expression of that intelligence. Something bad happens, well, we don't understand the big picture, but it must be, so we will accept it. Now, for something as abstract as the divine, that logic might work. Are we willing to extend the same license to our fellow human beings? That I don't understand why so and so having won an election did this, but it must be that it is good. How far can you stretch that? Not to the level that you would do for the divine. So somewhere we would have to start wondering that do we elevate our elected leaders to divinity or do we have other controls on them? Or even to, let's say, the industry leaders, even to the academic leaders. So let's go into each of them. So let's say I look at privacy and I apply informed consent. So privacy is typically these days about the information. Okay. That somebody has come to know something about me or something about me I told for one reason and it is now being spread all around for some other reason. Do we understand the difference between data and objects? See, an object is something physical. It can't suddenly get cloned. So I own it. If I lend something to my neighbor and my neighbor gives it back after 3 hours and I see that it is in a good state, then after 3 hours, it's as before and I continue. For those 3 hours, my neighbor used my screwdriver or whatever it was. Data is a completely different animal. With data, it can be copied, it can be edited, it can be embedded into something else. So the consequence of giving somebody access to data for 3 hours is very, very different from letting somebody borrow a physical object for 3 hours. Okay. And so tricky it is that even the big corporations which are trying to do this by doing licensing and licensing agreements, how crooked are those licensing agreements? How big are the legal teams enforcing that licensing agreements? And even they are getting ripped off left, right, and center. Where is the chance for you and me to enforce anything like that? We don't. So the very nature of digital information especially needs to be understood. Digital information is perfectly reproducible. It is not my vague recollection. It is not my artist sketch of who came into my garden at night. It's a photograph. If something like that is getting out of my control, then it is gone. I can't hope to get it back. So the data that we are talking about, it's not part of us as a part of a physical body or possessions. So now even the social reaction to it is very different. If I had gone into your house and stolen 10 of your DVDs, that's a theft. Nobody doubts that that's a theft. Okay, there'll be hue and cry, whatever. But if I borrow your DVDs, make a copy of it, whether it violates anybody's IPR, licensing, whatever, and you give the 10 DVDs back, how many people feel that an outrageous crime has been committed? And why don't we feel it? Because, hey, it's that person got it back. It's not that I've taken away his DVDs forever. So the way we are reacting to information, we are trying to use the same analogy that we had for physical objects and make decisions about information ownership, information transmission, information control. And it's not always well thought out. So let me give you some extreme examples. I take a picture of you. Now, politically correct brigade will say, no, I should not have taken a picture without asking you first, and you want to delete it from my phone, a whole bunch of things. But look at the underlying physics of it. Nothing of you is in there. Sun produced photons, they came down somewhere here, scattered off your face, it came into my camera. I'm a photon collecting machine, God-given photons. Too bad your face got in the way. So what is it that you're trying to say that I've captured of you? Now, since I'm not physically taking something from you, I can surreptitiously do it. Now, if you have laws created which are not backed up by the physics of the universe, you'll end up having to spend an enormous amount of legal effort and administrative effort to enforce those laws. So making laws which are not physically aligned are never an economic thing to do for social design. So we have to worry about that. I'm not saying don't make that law, but understand that it's going to be a very, very hard law to implement actually. Then take something like an X-ray. Fine. Let's say during 2021, I went and got myself a chest X-ray because my throat was hurting. We all know what that was about, COVID. Fine. Now, I may say that it's my chest X-ray because, hey, it's my chest. Now, the doctor might say, well, fine, you by yourself would not have produced an X-ray out of nowhere. I said you have to go stand sideways at the camera, hand behind your back and take a deep breath. So therefore, that was my IPR which went into the creation of that X-ray. Now, the manufacturer might say that ultimately you are putting there that it was taken on this Wipro machine, GE machine or Bosch machine, whatever. So their reputation is on the line with respect to the X-ray. So however, they have not been party to that digital artifact. The hospital has actually created that entire infrastructure which allowed that to happen. And the government went and subsidized the taking of all these COVID measures. So you might intuitively say that my chest X-ray is about my privacy. But If you think about it deeply, it is not. It is not that simple. And if you are going to say that content defines ownership, the counter I always give is that does every banknote in India belong to Tushar Gandhi? He's got his grandfather's face on it. Now, I go and take satellite images from upstairs. Does it belong to the person I photographed? No. Then we say that no, it's my satellite, my image. Go tell Maxa that every India image belongs to India. It won't. So, digital artifacts, sensory outputs, these things are still murky domains. And do not rush with a bleeding heart to just take the politically correct position. If the physics doesn't support you, you will get nowhere. You will have a sense of anguish, you will create a lot of noise, but the policy will be unimplementable. So we have to be careful of thinking through how complex is this object, who all created it, and who all will use it. So that's the last line there. I can use it for my checkup. Do I isolate myself or not? It can be used for epidemic control. Has COVID come to CV Ramanagar or not? It can be used for medical research. That is this COVID or is this not COVID? Because they did a DNA test and said that though I have spots, I'm not actually COVID positive. And finally, what we all did, we as in AI scientists like me, we took all the data and started building AI models. Now, how do you now track the ownership of information into all of these? Anything but easy. And under these conditions, if we come up with outlandish and exaggerated privacy norms and rules, we will end up shooting ourselves in the foot. Not that we don't need protection. We need protection, but it cannot become an imposition on somebody else. I may have a right to privacy, but A, I don't have a right to lie. B, I cannot have a right to enforce ignorance on somebody else if that ignorance is going to hurt them. So these are the issues. We engineers will only for once create the problem. We'll build sensors, we'll build cameras, we'll build through the wall imaging. God knows what we will build tomorrow. Now, it used to be that people had problems and engineers were solving those problems. Today, unfortunately, the engineers might also create the problem and leave it for other people to solve it. And things like privacy and data is going to be one of them. Now, identities and priors-based experience. The first statement I don't think anybody will disagree with. Growth of digital identities is matched by growth of fears and frauds. Frauds are happening, so people are afraid. Theoretically, everybody will say no matter what you do, you are still vulnerable, so you are still afraid. So even among the technically elite security community, everybody is always afraid. Okay. So why did this happen and what went wrong? There is crime in this world. That always existed. Cyber had nothing to do with it. Okay. So the hue and cry cannot be that there is suddenly crime in this world because of cyber. However, we had developed a social understanding of the risks and the fixes. So I know when to lock. I know when to make sure two people are walking with me in a dark and deserted place. Various things. I know I have to keep some extra money in the bank. Who knows when my parents will fall sick. All of that we understood. The risks and the fixes. Now suddenly along comes this cyber technology where identity suddenly required authentication. That we never did before. I mean, you see my face. That's a verifiable identity. Knock on the door. Kaun hai? Main hu bhaiya. Okay. Voice recognition. Door is open. That's still verifiable. Then you have attestation. So and so has just come from the village. Chacha ji ka chota beta. And so you understand that, okay, given the social connection, this fellow will not rob me and run away. So that's an attestation of identity. The last thing that happened is knock, knock. Who's there? Me. Give the password. That we didn't do unless in some crazy movie or a storybook. But that is what we started doing in cyberspace. So this has led to a certain dislocation. People have trustingly given pins to some people. People have given OTP to somebody else because they did not understand the technology. Remember, the technology was hard to understand. They needed to do something. So you never know whether that is a good thing to do. What is worse is the other case. Some things were actually perfectly fine to disclose. One thing you have to understand that it is only your authenticator token where required, which needs to be kept a secret. Your identity never had to be kept a secret. I mean, I'm from old school and I remember the time when the Bangalore telecom directories would be lying all over the place, had our name, had our address. So, what bad thing happened to us because of that? Nothing much. So, the identity is never to be a secret. At most, if you are using an authenticator to prove an identity, that authenticator needs to be kept a secret. So it was never ever the case that your 12-digit Aadhaar number has to be seen as a Swiss bank account that I have to keep it secret or somebody will take away something from you. For that matter, even your bank account number should not be a secret. You might have to share it with 20 different people to get money coming from them. And remember, secrets are serious stuff. Any secret is a secret till the first disclosure happens. And after that, it's not a secret in any occasion. Again, people want to keep many things secret. However, when you go to a retail store and you are at the checkout counter and that guy says, have you a membership? Here is a membership form. My name, spouse's name, my birthday, spouse's birth date, every kid's birth date, because I'll get 5% discount on every birth date. All the information is gone. Now, if you have posted all that information out, you can't now say that, however, this portal of the government should remove my name from it. Because that information is there. It's there on the net. By various means, it will propagate. So we need to have a clear understanding of what about ourselves we need to keep a secret and what about ourselves we should not be keeping a secret. Otherwise, you panic and say that anything that is digital or crazily alphanumerical must be kept a secret. Then you are going to try to keep so many secrets, you'll never succeed. So this is where public policy would have to come in, because left to themselves, people will get beguiled. So eventually though, and as I said, this is about the shoe pinching areas where you need to do a policy. But overall, I would still say that things are in a good shape. Digital identities in cyberspace was a whole new game, but eventually we are all learning through stories, movies, news articles. I was thrilled when they started streaming Jamtara on Netflix. Good. That's what we want. That's the only way to fix the problem. I mean, cybersecurity courses is not something that has much currency anywhere in society. 0.001% will watch such a course. Now, you have a good entertaining series going, you have got some sensational headlines and newspaper articles going, now people will get into the game. And that is what is happening. And the policy making has to balance the costs, the benefits, and decide on the accountabilities. Many of these things have got huge costs. When I do net banking, I'm not going and getting stuck in traffic. I'm not getting run over crossing the road. I'm not having my pocket picked as I'm walking out of the bank. There are other risks that is getting mitigated because of the net banking. So we cannot simply say that let's bar net banking from this world. No. And then there is the question of accountability. Because many of these are multi-step failure modes, we need to be careful who's ultimately accountable. Now, in many ways, the banks have willingly decided to inure the public from some of these frauds because they want people to use net banking. So they figure that if in 1 out of 10,000 case, even if they have to bear the brunt of a cyber fraud and pay somebody 1 lakh, overall business operations benefit they get from net banking will be more than enough for them. So many of these things have happened out of sheer self-interest of the bigger and richer entities. Some things might require a policy to fix. Then this identities, the best is to have a verifiable live biometric based identity like Aadhaar. We do need to understand why Aadhaar is the right solution. It may have had problems in its implementation in a third world country, but conceptually it was the right solution. That 12-digit randomized number does give you uniqueness without giving you profiling. The biometric does make sure that it is nothing to do with your intelligence and education level to be able to use the system. But the validity of Aadhaar is in the verifiable biometric. Tomorrow going and saying this is my Aadhaar number and here is a plastic card was never the intention of Aadhaar, because those Aadhaars are PDFs which can be edited. So that is not anything. Then came this business that we said that if biometric verification online is too technically a high-hanging fruit, we will give OTP on registered mobile numbers as a biomedia for a lower level of security. So that is where it is right now. For a functional, not so critical application, registered mobile number and OTP will suffice, especially if you're doing things remotely. But if you really want security access to a critical area, then it cannot just be a number. It has to be a biometric, whether it is face, whether it is iris, whether it is a thumbprint. Secondly, people came and said that, oh, but I can go and put a plastic finger, James Bond technology. Yes, but remember, there is a security model behind identity verification. The correctness of the verification has to be ensured by the person who stands to lose from a fraudulent behavior. So if somebody is entering the bank locker, it is the bank manager's job to make sure that he or has some chowkidar there with two eyes to make sure that it is the thumb and not anything else. For that matter, tomorrow they might even put an alcohol swab to get the thin film away and then make sure it's the actual thumbprint that is going in. That was their headache. That cannot be the headache of the Aadhaar database administrator sitting in Gurgaon or Bangalore. Incidentally, there's one in Bangalore. Okay. So we need to get these things right. At the same time, if it's an identifier, it's an identifier. Somebody else pinching it is not going to compromise you in any way. So many of these things we'll have to do. Now, what happens if you go to OTP? If the OTP, then it is as good as your registered mobile number. Somebody flicks it, they flick it. And chances of you losing your OTP is that much higher than the chances of you losing a finger, which might happen, unfortunately, but cell phones get lost far more. And somebody might then do some fraud with it. Of course, most of them have got the thumbprint to give a biometric lock on the cell phone in the first place. So hopefully. And passwords, if you look at, they were initially the most convenient, practical thing to do. But the PCs, the cell phones, the laptops, they are all hackable. And trying to create a completely protected PC, laptop, or cell phone will render them operationally much less useful. They take away a lot of functionality. So again, there are practical issues with going with the password thing. So verifiable should be priority 1, attestable should be priority 2, and authenticated should actually be priority 3. And that is from the theoretical engineering perspective as well as the social root of trust perspective. And something as good as a unique identity in the nation has to be with the government. A cell phone operator or a retail store clerk cannot magically create such a database on their own. They are not required to. Even if they mess it up, you can't sue them. Now, education, economy, and the population yield. See, the current design logic is pretty much like this. I build the most profitable economy from the point of view of commerce and technology. And then I say, okay, therefore, these are the jobs that I've created. Now it's up to the human beings to jump through hoops, qualify for the jobs, win the interview, and get in. And work as hard as I want them to. No looking at your wife on Saturdays, as some people have said. Crazy. Now, if you want to do it this way, can this demand always be satisfied, and should it be satisfied? So let us see how the escalation has gone. First we said, acha chalo, prathmik, madhyamik. Okay. So in terms of getting a certain awareness and social coherence, we said that was good enough. Then we said, no, that's not nearly enough for economic productivity. So we came to 10th. Then we said, no, that's not good enough. Inter we want. Fine. So we added a +2. That's for some low level jobs is fine, but then you really need professional. Now you add another +4 or maybe 3, depending on your branch. So that's your undergraduate degree. That also was not proving enough for many people. So you added a master's, another +2. But then, you are moving up the value chain and change is the only constant and all that jazz. So now we need PhDs to do all the design work. So I added another +4 there. And I stopped short of adding another +2 for the postdocs. In the science fields, if you don't do 2 postdocs, you don't get a job. It's as bad as that. Now the question is this a good design? Theoretically, it might satisfy this so-called economic requirement. But is this a good design? If technology is going to be changing so fast and we need to relearn things, then is it worth spending that much of time between the age of 5 and the age of 30 just studying? And then you're told at the age of 45, no, learning has to be a constant through life, back to some course or the other. Then why did you spend 16 years studying in the first place? So we have to see whether appropriateness is correct. Then, is every human being cognitively built to withstand that many years of education, that to classroom education? Answer is clearly no. And the data is telling so. How is the data telling so? Kids are misbehaving. Attention deficit disorders are going up. People are falling out. People are dropping out because they are unable to deal with the pressure. They are misbehaving. So now you label them as the problem and start saying, okay, now you need a special school for all these special children. But maybe the mode was wrong in the first place. We designed it in the wrong sense. So the definition of success also, if you see, in my grandfather got a medal for scoring more than 60. My father got a medal for scoring more than 80. I had to crack 90 to get a medal. Where are we going with this? And by the time it comes to my kid, if you don't get 99, you are not getting into Stephens. That's crazy. Now, this is unsustainable. Now, what you want, as per learning theory, you never ever train on your training set to 100% in any case. Anybody who's done machine learning will know that that's a recipe for bad generalization later on. That's overfitting. And you're wasting your time. So really, if you got 80-85% correct, that's about it. Why has the rest of it happened? Because actually we are solving a different problem. We adults never created enough education capacity in the first place. So now we started creating tougher and tougher entrance exam to weed the numbers down to what we can accommodate in the entrance. I can accommodate only 1 lakh students. So I'll have a highly competitive exam, bring 50 lakhs down to only 1 lakh passed, and that is what I will take. Again, have we adults ever inflicted such a logic on ourselves? There's a shortage of BDA plots. Have we had an open auction for BDS plots and taken it to 50 crores? LPG is in short supply. Telephones used to be in short supply. Did we have a bidding process and pay 20,000 rupees for an LPG? No. What did we do? We put it at a reasonable cost and said beyond that, if there is an oversubscription, we'll lottery it or we'll use some other method. But there was a cap. So really, if the education system is failing because of capacity, we should have an entrance exam which actually says that what is the capability that the kid needs in order to come into that college and benefit from that education. That is all the entrance exam is supposed to do. Beyond that, if you have 20 lakh kids qualifying where you have only 1 lakh seats, lottery it. Yes, anyway, you are not going to give 19 lakhs good news, no matter what you did. But by creating this escalating scale of difficulty for getting in, look at the other consequences we have created. These kids are into training coaches, training classes and coaching schools from the 7th standard, 8th standards onwards. The normal life is disrupted. At the end of it, anyway, that 1 lakh gets in. The remaining 19 lakhs are out of luck in any case, even after having sacrificed all their weekends, all their movie times, all their friendship times, all their family event times, everything they do. But because there was 1 lakh seats, only 1 lakh kids got in. 19 lakhs just had their normal psychological development disrupted. That's a bad way of designing our education system. This is where policy has to come in. You cannot allow this kind of escalation to create this kind of collateral damage on our next generation. Now, kids are of course not always all that innocent, but mostly we adults also have to take the hit for it. See, the other thing is this rapid social technology change. We need a different strategy. So you want to make it continual. You want to do a little bit of education, make it less costly to provide that big amount of 4 years, 6 years of education. So you can train more people with a lesser amount and then see who actually needs to go and get a higher degree. Maybe every 5 years they will go in for another 1 year course or something like that. So we will have to think of that, and that would then allow the training to be more appropriate to the times. You cannot at the age of 50 expect that what you learned in college at the age of 26 is going to save you. It won't. So then why spend so much time in doing that in the first place? That too at 95% efficiency. Now, what are the things that we can do? See, students and teachers cannot all be made to feel adequate. So I think we should have to bring the standards down to what the teachers can teach and what the students can learn. As a kid, I was always worried about what the students can learn. Later on, when I grew up and I went and interacted with some of my teachers and the stories they told me, I realized that they were as apprehensive as I was. They were wondering whether they can face the class and teach this topic as much as we were worrying that whether we can understand what they're saying. And it was the same thing when I was looking at my kid. At 11th and 12th, they're doing crystal field theory in quantum mechanics and they've got a teacher who has no clue what to teach them. Why are we even creating such a syllabus? Because each board wants to say that I've got a more dhasu syllabus than the next board. So for collar up of the powers that be, they have gone ahead and pumped all kinds of things into the syllabus. The teachers have no option, students have no option, and the less said about how the exam papers were being corrected, the better. Everything is on a key. You don't match the key, you've had it. So this system is broke because the overloading because of technology has taken it beyond the population's yield capability. And we have to make it now population centric and scale it back. Otherwise, the pain will continue. So these objects of social coherence and the skills for happiness, they have to be re-emphasized. And I will come to it later on. Intelligence must be conditioned to be empathic. Already there is a chatter going around saying that AI must be made to be more empathic, it has to be more gentle on human beings, it cannot come up with harsh decisions, so on and so forth. I would say yes, all of that I agree, but charity begins at home. Are we doing it to human beings first? Precisely the people who are the intellectually brightest, likely to go to positions of power, whether it is engineering, medical science, legal, whatever it is, they are the people who are getting the most stressful education. They are therefore having the least bandwidth and the least focus on the humanities part, unless they are in humanities. That's a different issue. Now, you look at some of these coaching schools, whether it's Kota, whether it's Narayana, whether it is any of these other schools, they blatantly say that if you come here, we are teaching you engineering and nothing else. And this is happening from 8th onwards, 9th onwards, 10th onwards. These are not kids who tomorrow when they become scientists will really have empathy for the social suffering of anybody. It's going to be their paycheck and their career growth. And after that, you can go blue in the face saying that that's not socially responsible. As adults, we didn't give them that education when we should have given it. That time we only banged them and said, never mind all social context, keep studying, studying, studying. So this loading has got to be tempered. And we have to make sure that people who are destined to get to the top actually have the other courses going. And in that, I have to say, personally, I benefited very much from the fact that in IITs, every semester there was one humanities course mandatory. Many people didn't take it seriously, but some of us did. Whether it was economics, it was philosophy, it was linguistics, it was sociology, psychology, it makes a difference. And I think we have to get back to focusing on that because that focus has been lost. Now, democracy in the technology era, and let me just quickly wrap it up. What we had said was that from the compute point of view, the value of democracy was in effect what engineers would call a genetic algorithm, a evolutionary computing approach. You don't bother about the theory of it. You just evaluate your state and say, am I better off? Am I worse off? And if somebody has followed a policy by which most people are better off, let's go with it. And this could actually work whether or not we understand capitalism, whether or not we understand communism or anything in between, or whether that theory is even right or wrong. An empirical approach based on direct measurement would work. But if you do it this way, then it can only be a backward looking verdict. You can say what happened about the last 5 years. Can you restrict a political campaign to what happened in the last 5 years? First of all, it will create a huge imbalance between an incumbent and a challenger. Because the incumbent has the 5 years to talk about. What is the challenger going to do? They were out of power. Secondly, even the incumbent, just because they built 3 airports in the last term, are they going to build 3 more next term? No. So the campaign will be about the fact that last time I built airports, now I'll build ports or something like that, just to say. So the future look cannot get avoided. Minute the future look comes in, the question of democracy being an easy compute fails. Now you need the average population percent to be able to say that if this is the proposition, given all the technology change, given all the globalization linkage, given all the complexity of our current Indian economy, is this policy going to be the right policy for me then? It's a prediction that you are asking people to do. And that's going to start getting complicated. So there is still definitely a dominant, how were the last 5 years component to any of our election results. There is, however, increasingly a component of the next 5 years, the vision thing, the planning thing. And where does that become even more difficult? Because as you have this complexity of technology and economy and globalization coming in, you have to also see what is the technology impact on the inputs to the electorates. Based on what is anybody deciding this? Their own personal well-being is part of it. But maybe they were lucky. Maybe they want to not trust luck and vote for somebody who's good for somebody else also. Now they're going to look for informations and assessments. Now that information and assessment, today, if you turn on the TV, you'll realize are all over the place. There is information and there is information. There are wise assessments and there are bakwas assessments. There are synthetic assessments. There are paid assessments. So the signal to noise ratio that the electorate is facing is beginning to go down. And that is going to make it harder to have a good outcome coming out of an election. So we would have to have some ways of making sure that we address this. Right now, the EC is fighting a sole battle, saying that between the start of elections and the announcement of the result, no polls have to be conducted and announced. I mean, you can conduct it, but you can't announce it because it will affect phase 2, phase 3, phase 4. But eventually, you also want to have an overall quality to the information that the electorate is getting. And when you have these AI generated contents, they are the pits. I mean, technically, I can make out which is an AI video and what is a real video, but I do not expect most people to be able to do it. And maybe 5 years later, even I may fail to be able to do it. So fact and fiction is really getting merged. And we need to know where creative freedom ends and where sanctity in democracy must prevail. When it came to these group formation, see, previously you had to interact with the people who were physically around you. So unless physically a particular area started having a certain political bias, you met people of all types. Those who in the US will know that Orange County always votes Republican because that's a physical boundary. It has existed for a long time. But today you are in cyberspace. In cyberspace, anybody can become part of any fanatical or weird group. So you will always get positive feedback from like-minded crazy characters that your craziness is in fact correct and normal. So society will tend to get fractured and have a higher number of these small self-sustaining crazy groups. And it is not going to lead to a connection across society. It is going to end up getting compartmentalized. And being able to sustain a single election across these kinds of pressures is going to be difficult. Now, from the social sciences side, there was something called evolutionary stable strategies, ESS. And that says that whether you have a strategy by which somebody else can use your strategy to undermine you. So right now, for example, and this might get a bit political, it's in effect an open challenge from non-democratic closed societies that if they come and interfere with the elections in open democratic societies, can the open democratic societies afford to remain open democratic societies? So the question is really, is democracy ESS in the presence of information technology? Now, I would again say that given enough experience, it will be. External interference is not new. It did not start with the 2016 Trump election. Foreign journalists were coming and writing articles on what is going on in a country before any election in any case. Nobody said that CNN and BBC was trojaning democracy anywhere else. However, when it happened with respect to their own elections, they went up in arms. Why is that? Because previously you knew that this is a BBC feed, this is an Air India feed, this is a Voice of America feed. You took that into account. The problem with respect to what happened in 2016 is nobody said, I'm Sergey from Serbia telling you to vote for this person. You pretended to be Sam from Minnesota telling you to do something. Now that put a completely different spin on it. There was an element of deception in it. So what you want to do is you want to be able to address the deception part of it. You cannot tell people to not interact with each other. We may have a view on who should be winning an election somewhere else, and other people will have a view on who has to win an election here. That interaction cannot get stopped. But at least we should know who it is, what is their background, what is their likely agenda. And finally, just as you have this high frequency trading, which is making a mess of the original intent of the stock market, you have this, what I would call the high frequency democracy. It is all too easy to conduct a quick survey. Now, one is for the smaller sample sizes, the bias, the method of conducting the surveys, all of that is a problem. So that is the problem because of the small numerical size. There is also another problem. We are always going for small temporal scales. Everybody wants to know just after a big event how people reacted to it. Just after the election or before the election, they'll have a survey. 2 years after the election, who conducts a survey to say that do you repent or are you happy about what you voted for 2 years back? Yet that is the more meaningful question to ask, and people should think about it and then answer it. Because that bigger timeline gives you time to get through these uncertainties. 2 years back, you may not have known what the implication was. 2 years later, you know what is the implication of a particular policy or a particular shift to the left or the right. Now you might say whether you liked it or not. But those things are not being done. Everybody is going for high frequency. If some dhamaka happened on Monday, by my Friday's publishing of that weekly periodical, I must have my pie charts in place. And after that, I'll forget about it. So this is another thing which is making democracy have more noise than signal. However, it does not have to be. If by our conscious decision or by policy, we force a long-term view on things, it could actually help. So now policy challenges for AI. I'll leave the slides. There are 3 slides left. I'll just leave you all to deal with it later on. But in terms of AI, I would like to say the following things. First of all, it's all very well to get outraged and start putting policy controls on AI. But remember one thing, AI is getting to be in the same league as human beings. So if you put a policy on AI, you have to check whether that policy holds or makes sense for humans. If you are to say that unless I have 99.99% safety guarantee, I will not allow autonomous driving, the question is, what is the driving test for giving a human a license which gives you that number? And are you willing to dispossess the rest of them of the driving license? So similarly, when it comes to say the background material for model building, people have gone ahead and said copyright violation, this and that. If I were to use that same metric for sanitizing the syllabus and the textbooks going in for engineering or arts colleges, then what happens? What is it that we are left to teach with? So very often we are going ahead and rushing to make policies for AI, which if applied back to human beings would flunk the human being. And that's dangerous because that dichotomy will come back to haunt us. So humans are also biased, humans are also error prone, but at a certain point, we say this is good enough. Up to that point, we should stress the AI, no doubt. But we should not take it to 5-9 limits and things like that. Another thing has to do with explanations. People often say that AI should be explainable so that I know what the AI is doing. I would say that's fundamentally wrong. As human beings, we go to human expert humans. So you go to a doctor or you go to an architect or you go to whoever. If the advice that the expert can give you is limited to your level of expertise for you to understand that explanation, why did you even go to the expert? I go to the doctor because the doctor knows a lot more about my heart than I do. Now, if what he's saying doesn't make sense to me, so I don't take the medicine, that's a tragedy. But we human beings do have social controls, and the control is believability. We look for proof of familiarity. I will not take stock advice from my dentist. I will take braces from my dentist because I know the dentist is familiar with teeth. He may or may not have bought a stock or bought a flat lately. That's a different issue. Then there is a proof of capability. So that is why people will have all kinds of plaques on their wall. Restaurant of the year, dentist of the year, mechanic of the year, cleanest airport in south of India's, something like that people will put up. These are all proofs of capability. So as human beings, when we are dealing with an information or capability deficit, we look for reasons to believe the expert. We don't try to become the expert. That's too taxing. So similarly, the policy controls on AI should be to force the AI to demonstrate that it was in fact trained to do what you're asking it to do, that this input was something that was within its data set, that within all the things it got right and wrong in the data set, was it getting it right near about the input that you are giving? See, ultimately as students, we don't get 100% in everything. We know. So we know what is our strong point, we know what is our weak point. So I might say that my percentage is 85, but that 85 might have 97 in one paper and it might have 65 in another paper. So if I'm looking for a job, I will not land a 65% paper as my job. That nobody should believe me. So similarly, the AIs can be made to reveal their familiarity and their capability, and that would be a far more worthwhile thing to do. And remember, the way we humans talk, expert to amateur, we use language. So that common language is necessary. Okay. The AIs that we are training, especially these deep learning networks, they have a completely human language independent internal representation. So to say that I will understand why the AI came to a decision is a false hope. So more than explanation, what we should be doing is cutting to the chase and saying, why should I believe you? Then they will say, okay, look, I was fed with 20 different data points similar to this. Among those things during my training, I got 97% of them right. Okay, so now I will believe it. Suppose that fellow says, I have only seen 3 data points like this and I never got any of them right during training. Why would I believe that output? That particular output I don't believe in. I'm not saying that paisa wapis I'm giving that AI back to the manufacturer. No. So those things have to be there. Thirdly, AI is a reactive element. It is going to make systems behave differently. And we are not used to that kind of reaction from many things. So you go to a website and you see a price. In the earlier era, that price used to be a static. Now, based on your cookies and your browsing history, it might have gone up or gone down. So they might be using AI. You can't prevent that, but you can at least have transparency. So just as in food products, you have a green dot and a brown dot for veg and non-veg, or maybe of peanuts or cholesterol or whatever. We can start demanding that any service or product which has got an AI inside it causing it to react differently under different conditions should at least have an indicator on the top which alerts a human being that this is an intelligence. This can react to me. So I have to think about how I react to that person. You pick up a broom and you start using the broom. You're not going to say that, okay, if it is a floor is too dirty, then the broom is going to get tired. No, the broom is a broom. But if you're asking your house help to do a cleaning for you, now you think differently, because the house help might react to an economic motive, may react to an emotional input. I am angry or I am sad. So how we humans behave with humans who are intelligent and with the rest of the objects which are not intelligent are very different. We have that capability in our head. We need to trigger the right capability as average humans start dealing with AI. So we need to at least tell them that, look, you're dealing with an AI. So actually get your human behavior into the picture. Now, finally, this business of a right, what qualifies as a right? Now, I am of course out of my domain of expertise, but based on the kinds of policies that we were sometimes asked to implement or formulate, I would have to say the following. It is not enough that some outcome is desirable to say that should be made a right. See, our founding fathers had their reasons for saying these are our fundamental rights, and those are the directive principles of state policy. Everything there did not become a right here. So it's good to have food. You don't have a right to food. Just because you're hungry, you can't loot a farmer and eat up his grains. Starvation is not desirable, eating is desirable, but it's not a right. Because we understand that there is an economic human effort required to meet that requirement on our part. And that cannot be snatched away. That has to be negotiated with that other party. So, yes, a right has to be desirable. It also has to be self-actuated, and it cannot be a burden on others. So, I have a right to expression means I can say something on my own. But I can't force you to create a video and put it on your site and run up an expense for it because I wanted to say something. That is not on. And it should have consistency when applied to all members of society. So me having a right cannot dispossess you of whatever little rights you have. So that if, for example, and I'm saying this when it comes to things like, say, privacy, As I said, that privacy cannot go so far as to say, I have a right to lie. That the reason I'm denying you information is that I can get away by saying whatever I want later on. It cannot even be a right to inflict ignorance. Because I shared some information with him, he wanted to share that information with her. I want to invoke my right to privacy by stopping him from doing so. That's inflicting a third party ignorance. If I have given it to him that information has a mechanism of going to her, it should. If I did not want to disclose that information, I should not have disclosed that information. Because the manner in which it can get edited, embedded, communicated is way too much, and you will be in unending litigation if you're trying to deal with these kinds of third-party transactions. Now, the technology impact is this. People have already asked for more and more powers. Humans wanted to be gods. So you wanted to have telepathy. Fine, we engineers gave you cell phone. Talk to anybody you want, communicate your thoughts. We wanted like to have Divya Drishti like Sanjay. You can see streaming videos on your cell phone wherever you want. You all wanted to be omnipotent and know all kinds of things. Fine, just use Google and ChatGPT. You're the expert in everything. So all of that has been going on. Now, in doing that, the individuals are getting more and more empowered. And the crux, the human failing is this, that as other people get empowered, I feel I'm being disempowered. Previously, I could have denied them something, I could have lied about something, and now I can't. And this thing started, for example, with attendance system. Now you put a thumbprint, then Modi knows when you are in and when you are out. अरे यार पहले तो हम बोल सकते थे सर हमने तो आया था 8 बजे आपने देखा नहीं मुझको. Now it's say okay look AIBAS is saying 9:40 gone 1 CL. Not Indians, even in the American, they had this collar line identification technology rollout. Big ruckus. Because previously I could have been in the beach and told my advisor I am in the lab. Now caller line identification, he knows which phone I'm calling from. Gone. Incidentally, people were blind. Now technology has given them that information. Now somebody else is feeling disempowered. Should I use right to privacy to block caller line identification on somebody else's phone? How intrusive can a right get? So these are things we need to think about. We have asked for all kinds of powers, we are getting all kinds of powers. But then like gods, we have to become so perfect that we pretty much have nothing to hide. And that's going to be a tall order. But in the meantime, rushing into the policy space and creating non-physically sustainable rules is not the correct way to go. You have to think this thing through very deeply. And finally, this is the last slide. Okay, halfway into the tea break. See, this economy and education system. I talked about that education system. Now let me talk about the economy part, because I think this does have a huge impact. See, what they teach in economics. As I said, they made a mistake of teaching us humanities courses in IIT in our times. Okay, so Samuelson was studied, and it was studied more after IIT than during the IITs. Okay. So there is all kinds of microeconomics, macroeconomics, all about production theory, all about consumer gains and surpluses, and how to spend your money, how to earn your money, all of that they did. And Samuelson, being Samuelson, is honest enough to say that there is a crucial link missing. Ultimately, the people who are earning are also the people who are spending. How does that impact? Because if you design an economy for better and better productivity, you may then decide I want to hire less and less of the population. And as robotics and AI increase, you might decide that the highest productivity is if there's no humans present at all. I mean, I have robots, I have AI, I have power supply, I have 5G, 6G streaming networks, industry, whatever. I don't know where the count is, 4.0, 5.0, 6.0, whatever. All of them are squeezing humans out of the loop, which is great for the productivity part. But then who's getting the money out of all of that? That is getting locked with a few people. Now, would all that money locked with a few people create the same demand curve as if you had a more egalitarian society across everybody? No. So forget about the social justice of it. I'm even talking about the mathematical sustainability of it. So it means that your production strategy is going to impose a certain income distribution on the population. The income distribution on the population is going to create a certain demand distribution across all your goods and services. And if this distribution of goods and services doesn't match what you were producing in the first place, obviously you have not solved it correctly. You have not designed the economy correctly. And even if you get past that, there's a question that if this is the magical economy, can I train a human population to run that economy? As I said, that is itself an open question. But this is a question we have to face. So far, we were always assuming that, oh, I am a small person, I am running one small business, one small government, one small country. Overall, law of large numbers will take care of it. But now the systematic movement away from human beings and concentration of all the economics as a inference that, okay, therefore the management gets everything, the CEO gets all the money. We've wiped out the entire bottom 40% of the labor force. That's not making any sense. Again, this is a situation where left to individuals will be in the wrong state. So policy intervention would be required, which can be one of two ways. You might directly incentivize having a salary expense among your expenses. Right now, it is so much easier to buy a hardware setup and put some software on it than to manage 50 opinionated human beings. It is a management problem. I can deal with that server, I can on it, off it, upgrade it, whatever I want. But with 50 human beings, each with their own view of what is their correct pay package, what is their career path, this and that, somebody will leave, somebody will fight, somebody will sue the company. That computer on the desk is doing nothing of that, right? It's a nice, good guy, just working 24/7, not looking at his wife on Saturdays. So the management is all going for that automation solution. But forget about the social justice of it. It will not even work as an economic solution. And this needs to be brought out. This needs to be therefore enforced. How it has to be done, I don't know. But clearly right now the equation is out of balance. This will not work. It will crash. So this is not something that will immediately crash, but yes, we are all feeling the pinch. All our kids are having a tough time. But then again, you might say, my grandfather said my father had a tough time. My father said I have a tough time. That's going on. But somewhere I feel this is going the way of the Christmas turkey in that, I forget the name of that book, that it said on March, life is good, April, life is good, so on and so forth. But finally, when it came to November, it went gutch. So if you're counting on the law of large numbers and human flexibility to perpetually bail you out, it cannot. And I think we're reaching that stress level where we need to preempt such a bad outcome from happening. Let's not forget the history of human civilization. As we create a civilization, the rich people and the learned people take control, forget to look after the small guys. Sooner or later, there is either a decay or there is a revolution or there is an external attack. Civilization has not been linear. It has been very much sinusoidal, up and down. So why ask for trouble by getting into the down? I think for once we do have enough compute to actually compute a solution like this and make sure we have steady state. And it should also be matched with the education system. It has to be matched to our fertility profiles. Every section of society does not have to be at 2.1 fertility level. It won't be. But you might therefore build a multipolar social model where somebody is at 1.0 or 0.5 and somebody else is at 3.0 and 4.0. And overall in society, you still have mobility and you still have long-term stability. So these are some of the scary calculations we'll have to do. Let me remind you that Mahalanobis long back had created a 3-sector model of the Indian economy and said, what is the optimal rates of growth for consumption, for capital investment, for government? Today, we might have to create a far more complicated model, having many more sectors of the economy, many more demographics involved, and we have to then solve it. And it is possible. So I leave it to you people to actually do all of this. As an old man, my job is done. And thank you very much. And I just hope that the Akla Cholore background tune to the lamp lighting was not a precursor to the fact that after that everybody goes in their own ways. I think we all need to actually go together. Akla Cholo is not going to cut it for us into the next generation. Thank you.
It was wonderful. Thank you so much, sir, for daring to take risky stands, staging unsettling conversations, and for provoking our thoughts and putting us in pinching shoes and challenging us to question our reaction to everything. For emphasizing on happiness, expertise, common language, patience over mandated rush. We would now request Rajlakshmi ma'am to felicitate our speaker of the day, followed by Professor Arnab, who would be giving the vote of thanks. Thank you.
Yeah.
So, good morning. It's my pleasure and honor to give the vote of thanks for such an overwhelming set of thoughts from a scientist to a social science oriented, public policy oriented sort of conversation. Whenever there is God, election, divinity, privacy, I think that's a heady cocktail of all kinds of things that may potentially go wrong. I think we heard some of those kinds of things. We also heard some theorems. We also, I at least recollected some other additional theorems that we know in social sciences, which have similar sort of connotations. But there are serious challenges. And I think on that, while this might sound negative, I actually found it quite positive because it sort of re-emphasizes the reason why we have this conference, which is to think about public policy and how public policy needs to be seriously thought of, both from like a social context, from like a behavioral context, as well as from a design context wherein technology is changing what we can do with ourselves today. So thanks a lot. Thanks also to all of you for joining us today morning here and also online. I am very grateful to sort of have this conference go forward, and I look forward to interacting with many of you over the next 2.5 days. This is a very active time for all of us, so looking forward to interacting with all of you. We have some announcements which I'll just go ahead and make. We have a tea break. Next session was supposed to start in about a minute, but we'd also like to start off with a picture which is right behind. So there are doors on the back side. So can we re-sequence the thing? Let's all get together and do the group photo right outside behind the auditorium, pick up some tea, and then start off the next session in about 15 minutes. Yeah, so 11:45 is when, so we're cascading by 15 minutes, everything through the day. But this is a really great point of reflection. So thank you, Dr. Rakshit, and looking forward to starting many more further conversations. Yeah, thanks. Bye.
Thank you, everyone. We can quickly exit from the back gates.
Babu.